Hello, my name is John James and I am a writer and campaigner for male victims of female perpetrated domestic violence and an advocate for men's mental health. Today, Nick will be talking to Trevor Holsworth of Fundamental Justice, and he will be talking about his abuse, including verbal abuse and financial abuse, and the corrupt justice system. It's a very interesting conversation. I hope you find it interesting too. But before we go, don't forget to hit that like button, smash that subscribe button. The bigger the channel gets, the more people I can help. So look after yourself, look after each other, and don't let anybody make you feel afraid. Peace.
Okay, so welcome to this edition of FTD Talk. My name is Nick, and I am standing in for John James on this edition. And our best wishes to John. I'm sure he's watching this edition, as he usually does. And we send him our best wishes and hope that he gets well very soon, because he's not presenting at the minute because of health reasons. Otherwise, he'd be here. But there you go. So anyway, I'm delighted to be the host for this one. And our guest speaker today is Trevor. And Trevor comes from all the way over in Canada. So another one from across the pond. And Trevor's story is quite an interesting one, actually, because this is a story of abuse that's actually, it sounds like it's been committed in a systematic way through the court system, which I know many viewers of this program will probably be very familiar with. So anyway, Trevor, would you like to just quickly introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, thanks, Nick, for having me on the show. It's a pleasure to be here sharing our experiences in the justice system. I'm in British Columbia in Canada, and it's a pretty similar system to the UK. We're a parliamentary democracy, but we have a written constitution rather than the common law system solely that's in the UK. So a very similar system and similar system of abuse for sure.
No, absolutely, yeah. There's definitely a lot of parallels, isn't there, with all the courts processes in Western culture, really. But anyway, we'll get on to that. Now, obviously, on FTD Talk, we're happy to talk to anyone that's got experiences of abuse. We're particularly interested in talking to people like yourselves, Trevor, who are men, because we feel at the minute, particularly in the UK, and you may find the same in Canada, sometimes our voices aren't quite as heard as strong as in other sectors. But where does your story start, Trevor? Where does this sort of journey start for you in terms of what happened?
Sure. So it's a divorce story, of course. And, I met a lady and she had a small child, about 2 years old. And, we had 8 years of a good relationship. And she wanted to move on, and that's fine. But then she got involved, she was encouraged to go to the legal system. I think we had a fair settlement already, but everybody says, to really be fair, you have to go to the legal system, right? So she was convinced by her friends and lawyers to go into the law system. And so I was served and started going through the legal process. And I was representing myself originally. And I caught the lawyer committing fraud on a court order. We went to court and he wrote up the court order incorrectly. The judge gave him the right to dispense with my signature to approve the document. So he caught a fraud he committed fraud. I caught it and wrote back to him and asked him to correct it. He refused to do so. And so I got the clerk's notes from the registrar's office, sent that back to him and said, look, you got a problem, you need to change it. He refused to do so. And so, there was a couple of other things that happened. I also got a court order on him to disclose a trust account statement on a monthly basis, because all the funds of the relationship were going into this trust account. He refused to comply with the court order. And then we still had this fraud kind of thing happening. So I presented the transcript to the court to conclusively prove that the lawyer had committed fraud. The judge took the very interesting step of calling the plaintiff, my ex-wife, to the stand and requesting her to commit perjury and tell the court what she heard the judge say 6 months ago in a court, and the judge then preferred her testimony to the transcript, my evidence. So the voice of a woman has more power than the transcript in evidence. I didn't really think that that was fair or impartial, so or proper conduct of a judge. So I made a complaint to the Canadian Judicial Council, which is the body that monitors and investigates conduct of judges. And they wrote back to me and said, everything's fine. There's no problem here. We're not going to conduct any investigation, and have a good day. So that kind of ended that. I kind of suggested that they should re-examine that position, but they ignored me. Eventually, I made a complaint back to them saying, I think the judge that wrote that decision should be disciplined for writing that decision. And they wrote back to me and said that that was an abusive process, and they wouldn't be doing anything of the sort. At the same time, I'd also written to the law societies here about the lawyers that were colluding on the case, and the problem with a lawyer not complying with the court order and not supplying trust account statements. The Law Society asked the lawyer for his trust account statements, but refused to provide them to me, and refused to discipline the lawyer, and did not take it to their disciplinary committee. So I wrote to the Law Society and said, well, how are you enforcing discipline on lawyers, and how are you complying with your Law Society Act, which the number one provision is the protection of the public? And millions of people in Canada and around the world need to trust lawyers' trust account statements, that they're trustworthy. They ignored my letter. So then I kind of let things sit for a while and just got into my relationship. I suffered a broken leg at work, and I had all sorts of financial difficulties, which we're all familiar with. But I had this broken leg for 3 years where I was pretty much a cripple. But we were having kids at the time, so I was just crawling around on the carpet with the kids and spending lots of time with them, and that was great, of course. And
sorry, Trev, do you mind? Can I just interject?
Yeah.
Sorry, because you're in full flow, and I don't really want to interrupt you. That's a bad interview technique. But one thing I'd really like to establish before we go any further is, so your divorce and your court process that you went through. In the UK here, we have two separate things. So if you're getting divorced, that's a particular type of court process and hearing. And then if children are involved, then that becomes a sort of a family thing. So you said that with your first relationship, there was a child that already existed, and you sort of joined in with that, and helped to sort of father that child for a few years. So this court problem that you're now describing, is that in relation to the divorce? Is that in relation to child contact, or is it a bit of both?
This was just in the initial divorce.
Okay. So a financial sort of settlement. Yeah, in the settlement of the assets and the declaration of what's going to happen and all that kind of stuff. Okay. I didn't even get into the past. This is all in the first sort of 2 years. I had, sure. I had my apartment raided on multiple times, and all the rest of that crap, right? Called police numerous times. They never did anything. Everyone's got the same story at this point in time, and so we all know that story. So you're at the point where you talk about broken legs. So at this stage, are you now into, this is post-divorce and you've met somebody else, is that right? You're in a second relationship now? Sure. I'll fill in that story a little bit. So the divorce finished. I never saw the child again, lost contact. I was pretty devastated and just wanted to get my life back together and all that kind of stuff. So having new children kind of was the only thing that gave me a lease in life. That's what we're here for. We're here to bring up our children. That's the ultimate goal of humanity, is to bring a new child into the world.
The family unit is such an important thing to protect in our society. Without that, we're going to have a failure in
Well,
society.
some people would argue against that, but yes, I agree with you. I agree with you that the family unit is something that is sacred that we should protect.
Yeah.
But there are some dissenting voices out there, where feminists that might argue that. But yes, sorry, carry on, Trevor.
No, that's fine. Yeah. So then I'd made these complaints to the law societies and the judicial councils, and everyone just says, no, fuck you, all that. You can delete that if you need to. But we all know the story is that we have no voice. And that's what we're all here trying to say, is like, we are part of the society. We need a voice. If you don't give us a voice, you're allowing the abuse to happen. You're part of the problem. And that's the problem that, I'm exposing, as it goes all the way, the abuse goes all the way up through the system, all the way to the very, very, very top. And it's protected by the ruling class, the people with money, because they can work with lawyers because they have the money. But the people that have very little money, bankrupt men at the end of a divorce, well, you don't have any rights because you got no way of enforcing anything, particularly when the courts say that they can ignore their transcript, which is what happened in my case.
That is just bizarre, isn't it? That there is.
So what that is a claim of absolute power, right? This is what the Magna Carta stopped, is they stopped the claim of absolute power. It is contradictory to democracy. And so what we have now is we have lawyers and judges, the judiciary, claiming absolute power. So obviously that's something that we can't stand for.
But if lawyers, again, sorry to interrupt, Trevor, if lawyers, judges close ranks, I mean, certainly in the UK, one of the very controversial things that gets talked about is, and it's probably the same in Canada, I'm guessing, that family court is a private matter, and what that means is nobody other than those that are privy to the hearing are allowed to know what's said and what goes on, and we're very strict about who can access any information. So, for example, in my personal experiences in family court were utterly bizarre and cranky, but I can't really talk about it. So it's almost like they can get away with it scot-free because I can't report them. I've got no basis in which I can complain. I can appeal. I have got there is the chance to, it's time limited, but there's the option to appeal. But it's this business that you can be dealt with or treated in a very poor way, but there actually really isn't a reliable way of addressing it.
Right. So in Canada, we have a constitutional document, the Charter of Rights, that outlines our rights as citizens and the responsibilities of government and stuff like that. Whereas in the UK, it's all in common law and it's a little bit harder to track. But the basics are all the same. And what our charter says is that we have a right to a fair trial and fundamental justice. So, if you examine, and the UK common law is the same thing. You have a right to fundamental justice and fair trial and all this kind of stuff. My argument is I can't get a fair trial if I can't report corruption in the legal system, if I can't provide the transcript and know that that's going to be accepted as evidence, then they're not providing me a fair trial. So, but yes, you're right. It's very hard to initiate that. You can appeal that. But for me, it's like, well, the appeal is based on the transcript. So how can I go into the system that I know is corrupt and argue that? It's not really. So I wrote to the Minister of Justice and government officials and was ignored like everybody is. Then the government alleged that I had failed to file income tax statements. I'd been audited several times and all this kind of stuff. And so eventually the government took me to court and said, look, you haven't filed income tax. And I pled not guilty and then requested that my charter of rights be respected. But I'd already served the Minister of Justice a charter complaint regarding this issue, according to the enforcement procedures in our written document. And the Minister of Justice had ignored it. So I'd served them with our enforcement procedures of our constitutions, and they had ignored it. So that they're claiming that they're not bound by our governing document. So I made that point to the court and said, well, you can't really enforce the law if you're not being bound by the law. And they didn't really like that very much. So they ignored me and just served out the sentence. But, the judge was pretty, served out the trial and just sort of ignored things. But one of my other arguments, well, I had two constitutional questions that I served upon the court that I asked them to. One was, I made argument that the Income Tax Act was unconstitutional as it is written. And I also made argument that about the fact that the governor, the Minister of Justice wasn't complying with our governing document. Now, they ignored some of those and did weird things that they do in court, but ultimately they found me guilty and but gave me 5 years to pay the fine because I was broke. But I appealed the decision and then requested a writ of mandamus, which is a request to the court that a minister properly exercise his ministerial responsibility in a parliamentary democracy. And for the Minister of Justice, that is to protect the public and ensure that the administration of justice is in accordance to the law, which I knew it wasn't because he wasn't complying with our governing document enforcement procedures. So now you have a government that is illegal because it's not complying with its governing document. You've got a court system that is outside of its jurisdiction because it's not providing fundamental justice. So I laid out the entire argument to the judge, disclosing RCMP, threatening to destroy evidence. I had parliamentary ethics commissions that I'd written to. I had a stack load of evidence, all very, very damning and proving a failure in the rule of law throughout the legal system, from the family law lawyer all the way through law societies, judicial councils, Minister of Justice, the police services. And then it gets really cool because the judge involved in my case, his fitness as a judge had been already debated in Parliament. And both parties, political people from all over, he'd actually ruled that the law on child pornography was unconstitutional, and so he'd done that. And so his fitness as a judge was debated in Parliament. Everyone was saying, get rid of this guy. But they listened to the Minister of Justice at the time, and they let the judge back on the bench. So now I've got Parliament involved in this whole disaster, and I'm requesting Parliament be involved to repair the damage that they've done to me. And I'd written to the parliamentary committees in Parliament and been involved and tried to get my voice heard, my member of Parliament. No one wanted to hear it at all, of course. And so then I presented this all to court, and the judge was, well, she's a feminist judge. She was serving on the Human Rights Commission of Canada for 7 years. She was appointed by the Minister of Justice that I'm asking for the writ of mandamus just a year ago, but she is definitely a feminist judge. And then she ended up taking 5 months to write up her decision. And that was on May 10th that just a couple of days ago that she presented her decision. And her decision ignored everything that I presented and sent the trial back to the court for a mistrial with the implicit threat that they can re-argue it and put a new sentence on. So I reported corruption and I got a threat back, is the bottom line from it, and ignored my writ of mandamus, ignored the request to have Parliament review their conduct.
So what was the threat, and who was that threat from? Can you say?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the judge's verdict is an implicit threat. I'd had a trial, they'd found me not guilty, or they'd found me guilty, they'd fined me $5,000, just the smallest fine they could possibly provide. And the judge was very sympathetic and all this, and just a very empathetic, he could see the problems. But on appeal, the judge didn't want to hear anything that I wanted to say because it compromises their entire institution. So interestingly, before she made her decision, my website got something like 600 hits a day, all from Toronto and Ottawa, our capitals, and kind of the center of our legal systems, up from the usual website traffic of about 10 or 20 per day. And so my thought is that people in government and higher up lawyers put a lot of pressure on the judge to make this verdict. It doesn't really matter what the judges say for me, because I know that they're crooked. And really what I'm trying to do is just paint the picture to the public of how this system works. So it didn't matter to me whether she did serve the Minister of Justice or not. Either one creates a problem for them. And now they've sort of gone with this, well, we're going to be vindictive to him and send him back to the court process, which I've already proved is an abusive process. And interestingly, I also proved at the same time that the income tax collection system is unconstitutional as well. So we've got a massive constitutional crisis here in Canada. And the Minister of Justice can't administer the law, and it's a complete failure in the administration of justice. And it's a friggin' disaster.
This story that you're telling, and I mean, I'm not exaggerating, it kind of shakes the very foundation.
It's jaw-breaking for
on
sure.
Which the law in Canada relies on. And I know at the minute we're talking about a story that affects you, but this actually affects everyone, because if you cannot have, every system's going to have its faults, right? Whatever system you come up with, you're going to have the odd bad apple. You're going to have a little bit of crankiness going on, personalities in there. But what you're actually describing here is that you have protective measures, don't you, to stop that? So you can always have a naughty lawyer or a pretty poor judge, but you kind of have mechanisms in place to protect that, because it's so integral to the faith that everybody has in being protected. And if that's just not there and doesn't work, which you're proving doesn't, you've got a nation of people who cannot rely on the very system that's there to protect them.
That's exactly.
It really is that big. I mean,
it is really that big.
I mean, it's not that big, because no disrespect to yourself, Trevor, you've got to fight to get your story out there. And obviously, if everybody across your nation heard your story, they'd be pretty shocked. I guess your difficulty is, you're quite a small fish in a big pond, aren't you? You've got to try and get that. I mean, the question I'd like to ask yourself is, I always find when, as survivors of abuse, when we talk about our abuse, and lots of victims will say this, is sometimes they hear themselves speak and wonder if people believe them. So like when you tell this story, how do you feel about, do people believe you? Do you think it's so incredulous? Do you think people question your credibility?
I don't think they question the credibility. It's just too big almost to comprehend. when I make something that people can identify or connect with, then it's easier to kind of relate to. But we all want to trust these systems. That's why we've created them in our society, because we need them. And so there's a desperation in us that we want this to work. And we're told that it works. And the whole system is built up on this sort of series of lies that this is how it works and it's fair and all this kind of stuff. But when you start to break it down, it's all an illusion. It's a system of abuse. And the lawyers have had thousands of years to practice this and research it and work it. And they've been unleashed onto the family law system. Lawyers are the masters of divide and conquer. They take both sides and they argue it. It's based on the ancient trials of combat, and you put your best warrior out there and you fight till the death so that you don't kill armies. And that's what the adversarial system is designed on. And it's not a good system for resolving family law disputes. We all know that it creates more problems than it solves.
Well, when you think what's at stake, the lives of, children and, adults as well, but, when you think that people's mental health, people's long-term development and growth is impacted by all this. You've had an incredible fight on your hands. You've obviously been at this for, how many years has this gone on since the divorce? Just give us a
sure
sense of time, since the scale of it all. So
the divorce was finalized in 2007. I think we split up in 2005.
Okay, right.
So quite a while ago. And then
wow.
So then I had 5 or 10, or I had a bunch of years where I let it lie, from 2007 till about 2017, or then started just kind of ramping up. And I knew I was sort of ramping this thing up, and sort of started writing and working all my evidence out and putting it all together, and then spent a chunk of time doing legal research on the issue. Interestingly enough, I did do 2 years of law school back in Australia. So I had a lot of interest in politics and legal studies. And so
that definitely comes through.
If I'd been a lawyer, this would have been the case of my life, So to have it land on me, I studied 18th century French history for some reason, grade 12. Just it's just a full circle. And then I got involved in, I left law school because I wanted to live life. I ended up being a backcountry ski guide here in Canada.
Lovely.
Climbing mountains and backcountry skiing and
good for you.
Full adventure, So I very much know risk and reward and danger and all that, and that's my life. When I embarked on this, I realized that I wasn't going to win through the courts. I'm talking about exposing this problem to the public, and so the first thing I did was I published a full page in the local newspaper when I went to court, and I exposed the problem to the public, because I knew that was the only way through. Was appealing to the public. And now it's interesting, appealing to the public, because as men know, when they talk about their divorces, nobody wants to hear it. And I published my story and nobody responds, because it's just too jaw-dropping.
I think so you're talking about how you've been battling for so many years, because I asked you about timeline. And you said that your divorce was in 2007, and there was a period in between, and then you started to fight it. So I've got a question for you, but before I ask that, was there anything else you wanted to say on that sort of timeline, or in terms of what you were doing and when?
No, I can talk a little bit about what happened, but it's kind of I could talk when I went through, when the mother of my children then sued me for child support and
Okay, right.
child
Okay,
support.
okay, right.
But
Let's
you
come
want
to
to do
that in a
that?
minute. Okay, so the
Okay.
question I'd like to just quickly ask you
Yeah.
is, I mean, you're obviously a real fighter, and you're very tenacious. So it might sound a bit like a daft question, but a lot of people would have given up. And when you had your divorce settlement and the lawyer screwed you over, you could have taken a pragmatic approach. Look, okay, I've learned a pretty harsh lesson there, and I'm just going to move on. But you've chosen to fight this, and you've obviously really dug your heels in, and it sounds like you put up a pretty impressive fight and managed to expose quite a lot of things. But what motivated you to sort of stick with it and fight it?
Yeah, good question. I think it is in my nature. That's from the way that I was brought up. My mother was definitely a fighter and a social justice kind of person. And she believed in doing the right thing, no matter what the cost. And she believed that money did not matter and you should do the right thing. And my father was a scientist and studied mammals and human behavior and all sorts of things like that. And so I had an appreciation of just, and then my interest was in politics and legal studies. So I'd studied kind of, philosophy and stuff like that. And it was an intense interest of mine. So it all kind of fit perfectly. And then, I was involved in fairly high risk sports and activities. So the risk tolerance that I have is pretty high. And I believe in it. And I also had the case. If I hadn't had this case, I would not be doing this. But I had the case of judges ignoring the transcript. I had the case of law societies protecting lawyers not complying with court orders, with trust account statements, some pretty fundamental things.
Yeah, no, okay. I can see it's almost like a perfect storm, isn't it? But
totally
we're definitely very grateful to have you in our world, Trevor, and we need far more people like you to do this, because if people did just give up, because that's what they're relying on, isn't it? They're closing ranks, and they're just kind of relying on you just going away. And just,
I think that's they don't that worked really well for them for thousands of years because they controlled the information, they controlled the access to the judges, and they controlled everything. Now with the internet and our communication across countries and stuff like that, I could talk to people in Australia about the problem. I can talk to you, and I can talk to people in India. And we're all going through the same problems. The lawyers are sharing this around the world. It's not just a local problem. It's not just in our one country. They know what they're doing all around the world. And so we're able to gather more information and share more information amongst each other as citizens of the world. It's an interesting power arrangement. It stretches into politics and how principles of democracy work and stuff like that. And that's the argument that I made in court, was on democratic principles, and appealing to that democratic principles that they're supposed to protect. And they responded by saying, screw you. Which is very, very, very concerning for everyone. That's the start of police states and dictatorships and all sorts of things like that. When you have a breakdown in law and order, and they just push through and say, we're going to do it regardless.
Yeah. Okay, so so tell us how you post-divorce, you've obviously met someone else, you've had children. So how's that all panned out for you?
Yeah, so so I had kids, and they're now 10 and 12 years old. We split up when they were about 8 years ago, when the youngest was 2 years old, and it was pretty amicable. I wanted to get divorced. It wasn't working. I had no sort of financial kind of capabilities. I was in debt. She wanted to get out of it. She was kind of treating me like, well, if you don't don't bring in money, then you're not worth anything. All the stuff that men are familiar with, our value is attached to our assets and our earning capacity.
That good old patriarchy kicking in again.
Oh,
If you're
yeah,
not
yeah.
earning the money and bringing it
Yeah.
home, then
Yeah. So yeah. So then we split up and had a separation agreement, and I was pretty fine with it. She had a little bit underlying hostility and stuff like that. But I started paying out her
just
demand.
sorry, Trevor, again, sorry to cut across you again. Just to clarify,
Yeah.
the relationship wasn't an abusive one at this stage. Is that right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
There were some
sorry.
controlling issues where she wouldn't let me leave the house because of looking after the kids and stuff like that. Some of it's reasonable, but it was starting to go abusive.
Starting to get a bit sticky.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, let's pull the plug and let's get out of here. And then we split up, and we were sharing the kids week on, week off, and everything's good. And then started getting into some false allegations issues, and took me to mediation, and then we ended up in the court, and I refused to go to the court because of my prior experiences.
What was she alleging, Trevor? What was she alleging, if you don't mind me asking?
Nothing major. What was it? Just on financial kind of things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no problem. And there was an incident with my kid where she verbally abused me for 30 minutes in front of the child and stuff like that. But nothing like some fathers have experienced, for sure. So but then the legal abuse, then she started in on the legal abuse, and I just been trying to shut that down. And my argument basically is, well, I can't get a fair trial. You can't provide me with fundamental justice, and I'm going to stand my ground on that forever. And that's where they are. And it's, no one's talking about it but I have, she took the kids away from me for a whole winter, for 3 or 4 months, trying to break me, trying to manipulate the kids, and things that all fathers have experienced.
That is abuse.
Yeah, it is
abuse.
And abuse of the kids.
Abuse. Yeah.
I guess he was 7 years old at the time. He was devastated. He would, I served him breakfast every morning. I was in his life every single day, all the time, to being told that I'm a bad person. And, he's scared of me, and visibly scared of me. And my eldest was just totally confused, did not understand what was going on. We got him into
and on what basis? And on what basis was mother removing
because she wanted to. Because she wanted to. Well, she went to court and got a primary care designation, alleging that I hadn't looked after the kids and stuff like that.
Okay. And they believed her, obviously. They bought her story.
Yeah, she came into my house and pulled the kid out of the house when I was away and stuff like that. And so, yeah. Pretty abusive situation, but we got that resolved, and I spent a good year trying to get the kids healthy again and in a good mental state. It took a year of.
So how did you resolve that then? Just quickly, how did you manage to get a resolution to that one?
Well,
just negotiated, or?
Yeah. How did it get resolved? Well, I think the kids really were saying, we want to spend time with dad. And then I also was initiating this court action, and I was publishing some of this stuff in the newspaper. So it became pretty clear to the general public that there was illegal abuse going on. But I haven't really published the family law side of part of that. I kept that private, and
it's a bit really, it's a bit hard, isn't it?
In it. So I haven't pushed in that.
No, fair enough.
And so, but that's kind of stalled her actions, and I managed to stall the child support people trying to collect off me with the same action, saying, look, you're actually unconstitutional and you can't. And the court has put it aside. We'll see if they try to get back on it.
So has your ex tried to sue you or try and get money out of you in some way?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she applied to have the child support payments taken from $200 that I was paying her per month to $2,800 a month. So that's the current status, is that I've got $2,800. So then I lost my driver's license, I lost my passport, I can't leave Canada, I can't stay. I got the police threatening me, I got the courts threatening me, and
is this because you can't pay or won't pay, or what
I can't pay.
No.
I'm completely bankrupt, and the previous court orders left me in a state of complete disaster, and I can't work except for in my own chosen profession, and it's just a disaster. But I've got some good people around me, so that certainly helps to have a good support network. Some people that, and I got a new partner now who's, a great lady. And that's the important thing, I think, to send back as well, is that the abuse of men doesn't end with the man. It ends up with the kids. It ends up with the new partner of the man, and it permeates through society. It's just wrong. And I made that point to the court, but of course they have the right to ignore everything I say, and they exercise that one.
Okay, look, I've got a series of questions I'd like to fire at you. Before I do, is there anything else about your story that you want to make sure you get in before I start bombarding you with questions? Is there any
I think we've covered the stories. Thanks, Nick.
Okay.
Yeah, no, please.
Okay. First thing I'd like to start with is how are your kids? What is the current? I mean, obviously, again, don't disclose anything you don't want to. But like, is everything good now with your kids? Are they with you, or what's the situation?
Yeah, I'm not. The kids I'm on, week off, and sort of vaguely good communication with the mother. I've pretty, there's been a couple of false allegation things that I've sort of nipped in the bud, where they say things and you go, well, here is it, it's wrong, and all that kind of stuff. Super happy to hear the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp trial. That's what I'm spending my time doing as well.
Wow. Me both. It's incredible, isn't it? Incredible. Okay, so how what you've been through then since 2007, how has it affected you? So in terms of physically, psychologically, what sort of effect has it had and is having on you, if any?
Yeah. I think, we're probably all familiar with the effects of the abuse. You get shut down, you're emotionally shut down, it's a psychological assault. When your belief systems are assaulted, it's devastating, knowing that I couldn't trust the courts, the police, parliament, all these institutions that were brought up to say these are protecting you, to find out that they're not, and they're actually there to harm you. It is pretty devastating. But I suffered a broken leg at one point in time, so I had to.
Yes, you talked about because it sounds like you're obviously a very active person. In your job, you're probably active. If you say something about guiding, so with a broken leg, you're not going to be able to do much work, are you?
Yeah. So it was an interesting mental exercise to go, okay, well, if my life is being defined by outdoor activities for a long time, and then to have this broken leg, I had to go through this. Well, how do I live if I couldn't walk again, for instance? And I came to a point where I accepted that, maybe I wouldn't be able to walk. And I had to build a strong mental path forward, knowing that, there's still a good life for people and stuff like that. So that was a good mental strengthening. But then I got into bike riding, and exercise is really key for mental health and communication. and then I got into a new relationship, and all those three things are very, very important for our mental
Good.
health.
Well, that's good for you. Yeah, yeah. What do you think, reflecting on your experiences and parts being a man, do you think played in that? So
Yeah.
in other words, like, see, your experience is a negative one. How much do you think your gender played a part in that negative experience? Or do you think, had you been a woman, the shoe was on the other foot, would it have been the same? Or do you think being a man did sort of affect the outcome in some way? What's your view on that?
Yeah. So, I definitely felt bias in the family court right off the bat, like I think a lot of men do. I was made to pay all the court costs immediately, and the court orders always went against me and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But, I didn't really make a big deal of it at the time on a sex basis. And I really didn't for quite a long time. I felt like it was protecting the lawyer, the fraud thing. All the systems were there protecting the lawyer. But then
agreed,
I realized that it kind of is there's three parts of it, and that's the argument that I made to the court, is that I didn't know if the bias was towards a lawyer to protect him from this fraud charge, or protecting a woman, which we all want to protect women. That's kind of what we do in society, or protecting the plaintiff, which is trying to make sure that the plaintiffs feel safe and that they benefit from coming to court, right? But if you are protecting the plaintiff, then you're not protecting the defendant, and you're showing bias. So any three of them is bad news for them. And they've showed bias on all three: lawyer, plaintiff, and a woman. So they've got the trifecta there, and it's devastating.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One thing I think would be really interesting to hear your views on, and you kind of mentioned it earlier on, is an alternative system or alternative ways of doing it. So could you share your views on what you think would be a good way forward, a better system for justice? I mean, some of that's a bit obvious, honesty and integrity for starters, but perhaps you've got some ideas around how we might be able to do things differently to make sure that everybody gets a fairer outcome.
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of research, but I've done a bit. And it seems like England has done some work moving towards that, but there's a great deal of resistance in the legal profession to make any changes because they're making so much money as it is. Why would they change it? So you're not going to see change coming from the lawyers, even though they have an oath to improve the legal system, but they haven't. So it's up to us to change it. And the only way to do so is through Parliament. They're the ones that enact these things. And right now right across the world, they've enacted legislation that says that lawyers are a protected class. They have more rights than non-citizens. And ultimately that is the problem, is that you've got to, from creating lawyers with higher standards of rights, you're creating a second-class citizen in the rest of us. So I think lawyers are a problem. And I think maybe a way around it now is, as far as alternative dispute resolution systems, people like the credit card companies and Amazon, and they've got thousands and millions of disputes that they solve. They do it all online. They do it all basically anonymously. You don't have to disclose whether you're male or female or a lawyer. So I think there's a path forward with an online system where sex isn't part of it. And I've started to think government really is about dispute resolution and services. Government is there to solve problems and to listen to the people. So that might be a path forward.
I mean, I find that really frustrating. I mean, just in my own court experience, I was very unhappy with how the magistrate addressed me right from the outset. It was very rude. And again, to think that this is, I'm going in there for protection, but then right from the first minute, I have no faith that I'm going to get protected because of the way I've just been spoken to. And you just think, and I've got no way I can complain. I can't complain about that magistrate. There are certain conditions in which you can make a complaint. Those conditions are very strict, and feeling like you've been spoken to with disrespect isn't a cause for complaint.
Yeah, no, it's an abusive system, and it's set up to be abusive.
But if that magistrate speaks to me like that, you can guarantee that he speaks like that to lots of other people that go through that court, and it does the Ministry of Justice absolutely no favours whatsoever. And in any other industry, we just wouldn't tolerate that kind of service, that kind of, I mean, that's just a small example. I think what you've suffered is far greater than being insulted by a magistrate, but you get my point. There's no complaint process.
Totally. We all want a faster justice system. The current system is just ridiculously slow. We really should be able to put in a complaint and have a resolution within a couple of days. This extending it out over 6 months or 12 months or something like that is abusive. So we can definitely create a system that solves this problem, and by having it gender neutral, it will, and also lawyer neutral as well, it will go a long way. I think that's sort of an idea that's been coming to me over the last month or two.
Right, great. Right, if anybody's got sort of further interest in your story, how can they follow you and how can they connect with you? You've got a website, haven't you? So do you want to just let our viewers know what that is and how they can find you?
Yeah, sure, Nick, thanks. So I've got all this evidence and the story and all the legal argument presented in pretty easy to understand English at www.fundamentaljustice.com. And then I'm on Twitter at Fundamental Justice at Rule of Law Canada. And those are my two platforms that I work in. And then I'm discussing things a little bit with people in Canada on Facebook with, Fathers for Justice kind of groups and stuff like that. But anyhow, fundamentaljustice.com is the primary destination.
Sure. Okay. And sort of final question, really, what's next for you, Trevor? Like in terms of this battle and this fight, what is the next step for you? I mean, what's the plan? Where's it going?
Yeah, well, it's pretty jaw-dropping because it goes up to, it affects who the Prime Minister of Canada, because he has ultimate responsibility in this. His Minister of Justice isn't complying with the law. I did write to him, and he has responded, which is very encouraging. He is a feminist. Prime Minister Trudeau is kind of a avowed feminist prime minister, and he's got a lot of feminists in his cabinet. But I'm working with a number of groups promoting 50-50 shared parenting, and then also judicial accountability groups, and we've got petitions going to Parliament and stuff like that. But anyway, the Prime Minister did write to me, and he forwarded my correspondence, which included all of the relevant information that I've sent to police and the Minister of Justice, and it's a pretty damning document. He sent that to the Minister of Public Safety, and that was back in March, but I haven't received any response back from that. But I'm just standing my ground on this, and I'll just continue communicating. And basically everything that they do sort of digs themselves a bigger hole. So I'm hoping for a positive outlook, a positive outcome. I basically just want to communicate, and they don't want to communicate about it. And so I'm just here communicating with anyone that will hear my story. And thanks, Nick.
Well, it sounds like the system has met its match. So just keep going, Trevor. All the best of luck to you. And just thank you so much for coming on FTD Talk. and sharing the story, because it's a gripping one. And I wish you the very best of luck. And I hope, I'll certainly keep in touch. I'll track your story, and I'd only ever be too pleased to hear an update from you and let us know if there are any developments. That'd be great.
You bet. Yeah, Nick, nice chatting to you, and thanks for your work. It's very valuable.
Thank you so much.